Thank you for the introduction, Peggy, and thank you all for being here. I'd like a little bit of a round of applause for Dr. O'Neill Jones and the staff of TPS. I'd also like to give a round of applause to all of you. So everybody give yourselves a round of applause here. The reason why I say that is because, over the last 8 years, and as Peggy mentioned, I'd have a history working with this group, and I'm very privileged to have had that opportunity to work with this group. I've had an opportunity to work with Peggy, Taylor, Mary Johnson, Michelle Pearson. The list goes on. I could go on for about 20 minutes naming all the people that we could thank for having this opportunity. And in this partnership that we formed together, we found common ground with librarians, teachers, students, and the technology that delivers primary sources. And some of those adventures have been quite successful, and we'll talk about some of those successes. Others have been, let's just say, learning experiences. So let's talk a little bit about those as we go along here. Now first, an example of a learning experience here. This is my avatar in Second Life. Still trying to convince the world that virtual education environments are the wave of the future. Well, hasn't quite happened yet, at least in the way that I expected it to be. Because really, when we're challenged with using technology, we have to answer the question, why? Why is this important? And so far, from what I could see with virtual environments, for many people, that question has not been answered yet. There are many people that don't understand why a virtual environment is important. Now, in past technologies that we've used here at TPS, or as Peggy mentioned, in Venture of the American Mind, we've created a lot of technology, a lot of use of technology in the programs and the workshops that were conducted. Some of the first ones that we attempted to do was to get teachers to create their own websites. And many teachers have created their own websites. Some of the other technologies that we've tried in the past were, and Taylor, you probably can appreciate this, lugging a lot of equipment around downtown Denver in 100-degree weather one summer, and using GPS units to get the coordinates of photographs. So we would take a stance of where a primary source had been photographed in downtown Denver. We'd find that same exact location, get the GPS location, and we'd take a photograph, and we'd document the GPS location, and about 3 years later, this thing comes out and does that all for us. If we would have just waited a couple years, right? I mean, if we just would have just had a little bit of patience, the technology would have come around on that one. We've also used Google Earth to present primary sources in very unique ways. And we have some successes with that. Michelle Pearson and I had created some great Google Earth examples on the legacy of presidents. Taylor, you created an awesome primary source example of Civil War battlefields. And some other examples of using Google Earth and combining primary sources with Google Earth. Now, some of those have been successful, but others we would find, and we went into Google Earth that Walmart was where history once was. So maybe we should start putting plaques up in Walmarts now, because that's where some of that technology is going. And then there are the examples of use of wikis. And this particular wiki for TPS provides resources for teachers that allow them to look at the top tech tools, for example, over on the left side of that screen, mobile tools and resources, teacher toolboxes, and the inquiry process. And so many of you out there have used some of these technologies. And so what I'd like you to think about on the bottom here is which of these have been home runs. Maybe some of them have just been hits, maybe a single, a double. Some of you may have gotten a triple out of some of these. There might have been a few strikes and some foul balls. But why? Why is it that case? Why was it not successful in the classroom? And why can you make it better? Because sometimes these primary sources, it might not be the right time for the primary source, or it might not be the right time for the technology to be integrated with the primary source. But perhaps for you and your audience and your students, the question of why it is important hasn't been answered. And it's a very important part. When you're integrating technology, when we're looking at the future of primary sources, it's important for us to be able to understand why something is important and why we'd want to use these technologies. Now, with current technologies, here's a nice pyramid scheme. No, not pyramid scheme. It's a pyramid that shows Bloom's taxonomy of different types of technologies that are used in the education process. At the top we have the creating. I'm using Prezi right now, and it's part of that creating scaffolding of Bloom's taxonomy. We go down to evaluating and analyzing, and you probably are familiar with some of these technologies, and there are a few of these technologies that maybe you're not very aware of. And that's common for us. There are about 1,000 technologies every month that are produced that don't even make it onto this graph or this chart. And some examples of that exist right on the device that I'm using right now. And when we look at some of these applications and some of these things that are combining technology with primary sources, we see, for example, an example of the Holland Colander. And the Collider, Popular Science had created this app to allow people to see firsthand what the Collider is about. And this is a primary source. And usually when we see video, we look at video straightforward. But now video is becoming interactive, so I can turn and I can see all the way around what the Collider looks like at any angle. I could look up here, I could look around, and I could see firsthand, what's going on. Oh, thank you. I thought everybody was going, oh, because it was so awesome. Because I'm seeing some really awesome stuff here. So maybe it needs to refresh a little bit here. Sometimes our technology doesn't agree with us 100% either. So I apologize for that. It's the site that is Popular Science. So if you look for an app for Popular Science, the technology is called Condition 1, and it's I'm sorry. Yeah, Condition 1. Somebody asked again what that technology was. The technology that drives this particular video is called Condition 1. That particular app was an app that was developed by Popular Science. So if you look up Popular Science and the Collider, you'll get that app. And it's quite a fascinating app. Thank you very much. I had to search a little bit. I don't think I'll pick this up much anymore. But I will for just 1 second, because the importance of what I'm showing here in these technologies is that we're now finding that primary sources that are being developed are becoming interactive. In that case, it was a matter of me being interactive with the video, or my being interactive with this primary source that we have. I now have an example of a primary source, and this is Martin Luther King. And if you can't see it from there, it's Martin Luther King. There's a nice picture of Martin Luther King and some of the marchers that supported his cause, and some text of his "I Have a Dream" speech. And there are other technologies here that allow us, for example, with Second Sight. This is another technology. And with Second Sight, it's by Sony Incorporated. It also works with the PlayStation and the handheld PlayStations that they have. But the app here that I have on my iPad will allow me to scan this picture.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise.
I'll put my microphone right here so you can hear
live
it.
out the true meaning of its creed.
The importance
These truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
The importance of this example here is that we have primary sources that are now collaborating with each other. They're interactive with each other. We have a primary source that could be printed out in paper format, and with the QR code can access and bring up completely separate primary source. My last presentation here involved the combination of using primary sources. And we used Woody Guthrie as an example of going into Woody Guthrie's writing and then bringing to life, some important inquiry processes that we provided for students. They can inquire into the writing of Woody Guthrie and using the writing and the words of the time to search for things and do exactly what we're talking about here in this Bloom's taxonomy that we have. And current technology is really kind of pushing these things. And with the process that we have of this 21st century learner, the scaffolding that's talked about in the 21st century learner, these steps and scaffolding that lead up to what we're expecting our students to do, and what our students are expecting from us. And that's important. Our students are expecting a lot from us these days because they are born with these technologies in their hand. No longer is the term born with a silver spoon in your hand. You're born with an iPhone or an iPad or something like that in your hand. And we're finding that more and more. And what happens in this process is that we are teaching our students through the process and the use of primary sources why primary sources are important. And they understand this. And in the process of collaborating and communicating and creating, they're developing primary sources at a rapid rate. And these technologies are allowing us to create primary sources at a rapid rate. My iPad, another example, I have primary sources right here. This is a shot that I took in New York City. This was just this past summer. And my son, 13-year-old, takes a lot of photographs as well. And he's taking photographs that are a moment in time. And these are the same type of photographs that we use in the classroom that may have been taken 50, 60 years ago. Maybe someday that primary source or might become a primary source, it might become something that's useful in the classroom. But when we look at how the 21st century learner has developed, and we look at all of these steps in collaboration and the importance of technology, we look at some of these future expectations, but also have to consider some of the first primary sources that were examples. And this isn't anything that's new. When some of these first primary sources were developed, there wasn't really a whole lot of thought into how they were going to archive these. The first cave paintings, I don't think that those that created these cave paintings sat back and said, I really need to think about how this is going to be archived because somebody 3,000 years from now or 33,000 years from now is going to really be paying attention to this. But we do. We pay attention to this because this is an example in the Chauveau Cave. And if you have not seen the movie Cave of Forgotten Dreams, that's a great resource. It's a fantastic recourse on media and how things were developed. This is an example, actually, of one of the first animations that was ever made. A lot of scholars thought that shadow puppets were one of the first animations that were made. But no, this is. If you look at the movement here of these animals on this cave painting, it's phenomenal. Now, imagine looking at this with the flicker of the flame. That was the light source that they had when they made these. And the flicker of the flame contrasted on the movement of these animals and created a very animated process of showing movement. These caves were also considered to be some of the first classrooms that we ever had because there's evidence of people learning how to draw these primary sources on the cave walls. We have examples of winter counts. And this particular winter count that we're looking at here is an example of being able to create tables and document and log things. And this is also one of the first examples of symbols and icons being used. When I teach an interactive media class, I ask my students to look at this. And if they were to use these as icons in an interactive interface, what is the information that the audience would want to see on the other side when they click on that button, when they click on that icon? These icons were the first examples of communicating a specific message to the audience. And we have other examples here of the Korean printing press, or the first photograph by Joseph Napier, or the kinescope by Edison. All of these are examples of the past technologies that were used in the first primary sources. So our challenge then is the future primary sources. How will we collect, archive, advance, create, and inquire of primary sources? This is a 3D model of the internet, and you are right there. I'm kind of over to the side on the left a little bit. I think that really bright one over there might be this iPad trying to connect to the networks or the interwebs. But this 3D model shows, just how vast the information is in the interwebs. This is an example of some recent research that says that every piece of information, every primary source, every piece of information on the web is no more than 19 clicks away from another piece of information. I find that astounding. 19 clicks. Kevin Bacon still has one up on this situation. It's only 6 degrees of separation for Kevin Bacon, but for information, it's 19. So when we look at these future primary sources, our greatest technology advancement has been our longevity. Our longevity, our ability to be grandparents and parents. Our life expectancy has risen to a vast majority of rate that if you look at the technology advancements over here on the right side of the screen, and you look at the longevity over here on the left side of the screen, 1880 to 1900, the life expectancy rose from 45 years old to about 50, and you can see a gradual climb. Well, this coincides with technology advancement. We, teachers, educators, we are the ones that help technology advance, that help preserve primary sources. Librarians become the source of information that will allow people to validate whether a primary source is valid or not, or the information that people are seeking on the internet and through these webs are valid uses of resources. And just showing what PBS has recently discovered is that teachers say that educational technology is a student motivator. And if you look over here on the right-hand side, we look at the most commonly used tech resources. Some of them are web-based interactive games and activities, websites to deliver class information. So for at least 44% of them, websites, personal websites, was a home run. They consider it to be a home run. My challenge to you all are 2 things. To find common ground, 1, we must discover and invent new ways of creating, archiving, and using primary sources. The second challenge is to push technology through educational uses. Because in our academic environments, we have the opportunity to create things that are successful and learn from our mistakes. We're challenged to do that. This is one of the only platforms where we're ever able to do that. Because we can. And because when we learn from those mistakes, we can make these things better. Instead of having the youth try to hold us up. So again, please think about why these things are important. Integrate them into your lives. And think about how, when we create primary sources with this new technology that we have, whether they're interactive primary sources or we're combining primary sources to interact with themselves, we have to think ahead in the future and think about how we can preserve this so our future generations can also benefit from them as well. Thank you very much.